Welcome to the Destiny of Manufacturing podcast. I am Dean Phillips and I'm your host. I want to thank the Precision Metal Forming Association for helping to put this podcast together for us. I have with me today, who has been on the show before, Mark Michalski. Mark is the founder of sizzle&STEM, and he is doing about 500 other things as well. But we will get to that in a minute. Right off the bat, Mark, what is your big takeaway for the future of manufacturing? What do you see happening?
Well, I think I need to put that in. Thank you. First of all, thank you for having me on today. We talk to each other all the time because we're both involved in SME, but it seems like a long time ago and just yesterday that we did this once before. And great to see your whole studio set up and all of that. So that's a welcome change. And all of that. So we're going to talk a little bit more about all the various different things I got going on. But in answer to your question, I need to say first that one of the things that I'm doing right now is I'm working with an organization called Forge. And Forge is a not-for-profit organization that is working with innovators and startups to help them get through the prototype phase and commercialization at scale. I am with them as and this sounds more impressive than it is, but I am the manufacturing expert in residence there. And what that really means is I am a right fit connection person to take our startups and our innovators and connect them with supply chain. So I help them with that, as well as doing a little mentoring to help them through their startup phase. So that's a new role for me, and within the last month. And so that has influenced a lot of what I think about the future of manufacturing. So let me answer your question now. I have noticed that what I'm seeing, certainly because I'm in the innovation space now, is that a lot of the new companies that are coming along are in mission-driven technology. And what do I mean by that? So I mean climate change and environmental work, bio stuff. So we've got companies in our portfolio that have done everything from, I was touring our facility in Somerville, Mass the other day, and we had a company that was doing coatings for solar panels to keep the dust off them so that they would stay more efficient, right? And right next to that is somebody who's doing LiDAR systems to map streets. We've got a company that did called CADSpark that's doing virtual visualization of parts before you 3D print the part. Which actually started in a dorm room at Lowell University. So that's quite the success story. There's a company out there that is helping deafblind people by using robotics to create a hand that they can touch and feel to be able to read American Sign Language and that kind of thing. So what I'm starting to see is that there is a lot of mission-driven stuff coming out of the need for the younger generation to be able to not just create a company for the sake of just making a buck, but to try to solve a problem, and that's good. The other thing that I'm seeing in the manufacturing space is that these innovation organizations like ourselves are empowering companies to get to scale by doing sort of the workspace, collective workspace thing. Our facility in Somerville is, just a big old warehouse that has tables all over the place and some labs. And so there's a lot of sharing going on there that's really exciting. It used to be that if you wanted to start a company and you wanted to machine a prototype or work in a lab, you had to go out and rent the space, and you had to spend all kinds of money on equipment and that kind of thing. And maybe you were an expert in the technology that you were working on, but you really needed some advice from maybe somebody who's a little bit older, like myself, who might have some experience in how do you get from prototype to commercialization. And so we're seeing a lot of that change now, in particular here in Massachusetts, where I'm involved. But as I look out across the horizon, I'm seeing it all across the country. Another thing that we're seeing is that organizations such as myself and the US government is starting to help build out ways to access the supply chain. I was just on a call the other day with an organization that is coming into Massachusetts, and it's called the Connects Marketplace. And it started as a government DoD initiative, but what it really is a huge database that's been completely vetted that helps connect OEMs and manufacturers and to the supply chain. So say, for instance, you need somebody that can machine Inconel and Swiss machining or something like that, and you want to try to find somebody that's local to you, and it's difficult to do that because, yes, you could go out on Google and you could do the Google searches and all that. A database like Connects will help you do that because you basically type in all the criteria and it will bring back to you those companies. So I think those tools that we have now are going to change the way we do manufacturing, and it's pretty exciting. Another thing that I had a recent opportunity to get involved with was I was on a webinar yesterday with an organization called the Northeast Advanced Manufacturing Consortium. And what they're doing is they are finally, the United States is waking up and realizing that apprenticeship is a good thing. And I think a lot of that is driven by the deficiencies we have in the workforce. But also, people are starting to realize that dropping $250,000 on an education, on a college education, doesn't always pay off. So we're seeing these not-for-profit organizations helping companies build out their apprenticeship programs. And rather than letting them do it on their own, they're having these certified programs where NAMC will come in and they will help you set up your apprenticeship program, teach your mentors how to be mentors for apprenticeship, and also get state funding for external training for your apprentice. So if you have an apprentice on site and you want to send them out for, say, to learn how to do geometric tolerancing, if they're working in the QA space, in Massachusetts, they will pay up to $4,800 to the sponsoring company to have them do external training. And obviously that works well with something that you and I love, which is tooling you from SME. I was actually on the phone yesterday with Jean Kuntz from Tooling You SME, talking to her about how that was an opportunity that we should continue to look at throughout the state. And she said she's already involved in that. So I know I'm bouncing around a lot, but I think, so often we talk about the technologies in manufacturing, and certainly things like advanced manufacturing and, 3D printing and IoT are out in front of us, but we also need to think about the things that are enabling us to change the manufacturing landscape from the human capital point of view and the innovation space. That's a long answer.
For those who may not have listened to the first podcast when you were on, can you just give us a quick synopsis of how you got involved in manufacturing and what drove you into the very entertaining and very exciting field of manufacturing?
Sure. I mean, honestly, I was that kid that took stuff apart, horrifying my parents when I was growing up. I literally took the front door lock apart one day because I wanted to know how locks work. And my dad came home and looked at the pieces all on the floor. And, well, I won't say what he said to me because this is a family-friendly show. But I got it all back together, and that was good. And then, I had models of everything all over my room and erector sets and Legos and stuff like that. I wasn't in a situation financially where I could go to college right out of school. So I took a job on a production floor, working on a pass line back in the day when they used to build PC boards by people actually stuffing through-hole components into boards and all of that. And I learned that I loved that pretty quickly. I started to go to lunch with the engineers who were on the floor with us. I became a pest, and they helped mentor me, which is one of the reasons why mentorship is so important to me. They helped mentor me. I went to school nights, rose through the ranks in various manufacturing technologies. I've worked in everything from that initial company was doing fiber optics and sensors for checking labels on modeling lines and that kind of thing. Light curtains that you would put on a freight press so people didn't get their hands chopped off. I went from there to, of all things, advanced computers, so massively parallel computers. That was actually funded by the DoD to do war games and that kind of thing. And that's a whole interesting story in and of itself. I did fuel cells, I did pacemakers. My father never really understood what I did for a living. That was kind of interesting. And every time I changed jobs, he worked for the Transit Authority, retired after 37 years. But I would move along every 5 or 6 years, and he would look at me and he goes, "When are you going to actually settle down into a job?" And he said, "Didn't you just work in a power supply company and now you're going to a pacemaker company? What do you know about pacemakers?" And I very vividly remember sitting around the kitchen table with him one day and grabbing everything I could, a salt shaker, napkin holder, some forks, a plate. And I said, "What do all these things have in common?" He says, I don't know, because they're in our kitchen." I said, "Somebody made all of these, right? Somebody took raw materials and put them through a known process and created these items." And that's what I do, right? The overall
Sure.
details of making fuel cells versus advanced computers versus pacemakers, quite honestly, you come up to speed on that pretty quickly. But the thing that manufacturing people and manufacturing engineers like myself do is we understand that you have to have a stable supply base. You have to establish a process. You have to make sure that that process is repeatable, right? You have to listen to the PDCA loop that comes back and says, "Well, that process is not really that stable. We're having problems out in the field," or "Our costs are all over the place," or "We're having trouble with the supply chain because they can't repeatedly give you stuff." I said, "Dad, that's what I do." And I just go from company to company to do that. I've been lucky enough to work at a bunch of startups. So I was able to be exposed to a lot of different things. And that's what was always exciting to me about being in manufacturing. I literally had a little bit of a cardiac event when I was in my 50s. And I was sitting in the emergency room, and there was a Zoll medical defibrillator on the crash cart next to me, which is the company I worked at. And I actually was on the development team for the pacemaker that they actually heart monitor that they had hooked up to me, right? And the doctor came in and I had the strip chart in my hand. And I said, "Oh, I see here I'm having a little T-wave problem." And he looked at me and he goes, "Are you a doctor?" I said, "No, but I worked on the team that made that device." He says, "Oh, that's really cool." So yeah,
That's
there's all
great.
kinds of great things. Manufacturing is a very exciting field, and going back to what I said earlier, now that people are really getting into being mission driven about what they do, manufacturing can even be that much more exciting. It's not just about making a widget. It's about making a widget that solves a real problem that's in our face every day, that we're listening to in the news. And I'm proud to say that I'm getting to work now in this new role at Forge with some young people who are really, really excited about what they're doing. And oh, by the way, they have to manufacture it too. So that's great.
That's great. Tell me a little bit about when you first got involved with Sizzle and STEM, when you started that company.
Well, sizzle and stem actually grew out of COVID, like so many different things. Um, by way of background, I've always, as a hobby, been involved in the culinary arts. Dean will tell you that whenever we were in Houston or Chicago or whatever, I was the guy that people would look at and say, what new restaurant should we go out to? So I had actually taken as a hobby, so a bunch of culinary training. I sold a company at one point and took a year off and actually went off and cooked. Since I was a kid, I always loved photography, and actually when I was at MKS Instruments, which is a semiconductor company, when I left there, I was actually the chief operating systems officer. And what that really was the CIO for the plants. I set up all the internet connections between all our 27 different plants and our process sheets and all of that. And so when I left there to become SME president, I thought I was going to get back in the game. And then literally I was on a plane on March 12th. If everybody remembers what happens on March 13th, everything stopped, coming back from an SME event. And we got all locked down and trying not to keep from going crazy like everybody was. I started ramping up my social media, and some people who are friends of mine who knew my culinary background started literally sending pictures. They would take their cell phone and they would take pictures of the inside of their refrigerator and their cabinets, and they would say, Mark, I don't want to go out to the store. Can you help me find something to make out of these? And so I would help them, take that rice and this piece of chicken you over here and make something like that. And I would post those experiences on Facebook. And after a while, people were like, wow, you should do a website on food. And so Sizzle and STEM was born out of that. Sizzle means the sound that the food makes when it hits the pan, and STEM is science, technology, engineering, and math. And when I put the website together, I said, I need a point of view. And my point of view wanted to be, and this is not a unique idea, there's Alton Brown and all that, but technology influences how you cook. Having worked in a restaurant, I knew that while they didn't call it a well-run restaurant, there's a very lean manufacturing organization. And so I tried to take those experiences and put it into my website. So for instance, in a recipe, there will be blah, 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 do this, do that, do the other thing. Put everything into a blender. And then in parentheses, it would say, do you want to know how a blender creates a vortex? Well, click here. So I try to do the STEM part as like the vegetable you didn't want to eat, your parents snuck on your plate. But I have things on my website that are like, what does it mean to be a manufacturing engineer in the food business? How does a company like Hormel make tons and tons and tons of bacon? What does the Heinz ketchup factory look like? What does what's the day in the life of somebody who is in quality control in the culinary act? And so we forget sometimes that food is actually manufactured, whether it's at the small scale,
Absolutely,
in a restaurant, or on the large scale at a gummy factory, making candy and that kind of thing. So that is kind of how Sizzle and STEM came to be. And really, it's the melding of all the different things that have happened in my life: food, photography, IT, building websites, manufacturing, and all that. And so now I've actually got a client base that I do website development for them. I do social media, food and brand photography, but also I've had a number of my clients say to me, oh, you have a manufacturing background. Like, for instance, I have one client that does awards plaques for youth football teams. And I helped him grow his company, and he got to the point where he's like, wow, I'm going to have to figure out how to do this in some sort of volume. So I actually drove down to his facility down on the Cape, and we spent the day leaning out his production floor. We've had multiple phone calls where I'm like, well, do you really want to continue to outsource your printing? Maybe now you should start thinking about getting a laser printer for the graphics that work on your site. We're looking to expand this product line, so we've talked about 3D printing. He's in the football space, so he has these football molded football half helmets that he gets out of China, and we wanted to expand it into cheerleading, so the cheerleading horn and baseball and that kind of thing. And he was like, wow, $6,000 to make a mold, and I don't know if it's gonna take off. I'm like, well, let's just 3D print some prototypes and put them out there. And so, I've leveraged the sizzle&STEM website into a social media company, which is now gone full circle into me consulting, helping helping small companies do manufacturing. Another way that I did that was a lot of my clients in sizzle&STEM came from me haunting the farmers markets. And that was another place where I would go out and I would just walk up to people's booths and farmers markets and take pictures and talk to them about what they were doing. I found that a lot of companies that were actually doing new products, soap companies, food companies, jewelry, that kind of thing, were also companies that started during COVID. People who were like, okay, I either lost my job or I don't know if I'm going to get my job back, and I need something to do, so let me go in my kitchen and make soap bars. And
there you go.
These are all conversations I've also had with some of these companies where, oh, you need to ramp now? Let me tell you about how you establish a supply chain. I've had to work with companies who were social media clients that I've actually talked to about doing inventory control systems. I have a farm stand who is a client now that I do their website and all their email and their social media, but I also help them set up a barcoding system for their farm store with barcode readers, because I was in there one day and I was watching Lauren, the farmer, right, helping check people out, and she was painfully typing everything into QuickBooks and all of that. And after that was all over, I said, how about if we just barcode everything so you can scan stuff? She was like, oh, I don't know how to do that. And I'm like, well, I set up barcoding systems for factories. I know how to do that. So another long answer, but it's interesting how, and I'm telling people now, especially people who are my age, who are thinking about what they're going to do after they retire from corporate life, is take all the things you love and take what made you get excited about manufacturing and operations and find another way to repurpose that. And so that's what I'm doing now, and I'm really happy doing. I'm still involved with SME. One of the things I'm doing there is I rotated off as being president, but I rotated on to the Education Foundation board. And one of the things that we're talking about a lot now is helping to change the image of manufacturing for even younger people. We focused a lot to high school and college over the years, but one of the things I think that really needs to be focused on now is telling kids, in the 6 to 13-year-olds, that everything you see is manufactured. This phone that everybody has in their hand all the time was actually manufactured by someone. I'm actually reaching around at my desk here for stuff. I'm remodeling my bathroom. So this measure here was manufactured by someone. I'm working with a restaurant right now to do their menu development. This little envelope that they put their menu in was manufactured by someone. And that's so right. One of the things I think we can do for at least younger people is point out things that are manufactured that resonates with them. Some of them are obvious. Are Legos, crayons, cosmetics for young girls, fashion. Well, that kind of thing. We so often talk about manufacturing in the context of making cars and making jet airplanes and that kind of thing.
Right.
And people don't realize that manufacturing is really about every single thing we see, everything we eat, everything we touch, everything we do for entertainment is enabled by manufacturing.